Hi, wrestling fans, and welcome to another edition. I'm John Arezzi.
Weighing 225 pounds, John Anthony.
Looks like the road's getting a little hot now. Anthony scooped up by the tree.
How you doing, wrestling fans, and welcome to the first edition of Pro Wrestling Spotlight Rewind, the only wrestling podcast that brings you back to the early days of Inside Pro Wrestling Talk, covering the history of our groundbreaking radio show, the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, which aired from 1989 to 1995. Each week, this program will highlight and review a different show from that era, giving you a look back at the breaking news stories with the guests that made the news in what was the beginning of an era where talking about the inside of the wrestling business eventually became the wrestling business, and a big part of it at that. On this episode, we're going to review episode number 1, show number 1, that aired on commercial radio. This was 1440 WNYG in Babylon, New York. This broadcast was from April the 9th, 1989. We will have a special guest joining us in just a few minutes, Mr. Rob Leonard, who was, in those early days, the first engineer of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight and an employee at WNYG, so we're going to share some WNYG stories with him. And for those of you who have not seen this show before, WNYG was a very interesting place, which we'll get into, a very mom-and-pop owned radio station where they put Pro Wrestling Spotlight on. But first, before we even get to that, I want to tell you that you can become a patron of this show. And whether you're an existing patron or have not been a patron before, what we do for $5 a month, you will get the entire archives of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. We did over 200 shows from 89 through the beginning of 95. We did some college shows, which really was the origin of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. All of those shows are there on patreon.com/John Arezzi. $5 a month will get you in the door, and we'll have we have other tiers up there right now. We're revising all of that by August the 1st. More on that next week. But right now, if you're a $5 patron, you can get all the episodes. And the other part of it is that you will get this show and all shows in the future early, before they're released on the podcast platforms or on YouTube. So if you're a patron, you get them days earlier. So that's the benefit of being a patron as well. This is a new era for us, and I want to bring on, without further ado, and it's a celebratory day here at Pro Wrestling Spotlight. We'll bring on Marsh, who is the co-host of the show. He's the creative director of the show, and it's also his birthday. And I don't know if you want me to mention that birthday, Marsh, but it is a big one. Happy birthday to you, first and foremost.
Hey, yo. Thanks, John.
Hey, yo.
Yeah.
A toast to you.
Oh, yeah. Cheers.
This is spiked coffee, by the way.
Is it? Good. No Irish coffee. I had one of those. I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously, my background's different from the former one. It's the big 40, so I think we're going to go out and we just moved to a new city, and there's a really cool Irish pub I like downtown. Maybe we'll go down there and have a spiked coffee, too.
There you go. You're celebrating number 40.
Yep. The big Quattro.
It's a big one.
Yeah. It's cool. It's going to be cool. It's just a little bit of a bummer because we just moved. So I don't know anybody or even places out here. So got to go figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you move into a new city. You just kind of explore and you see whether you like people. If you don't like people, you just stay in the house.
Yeah, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. So
That's what I do.
yeah. Well, yeah.
I don't like the human race. I like going back in time.
It's my favorite part
like the
about this
present.
city is how low population it is. When I go places and it's busy, it's not that busy. And I'm like, this is nice. No one's around. So it's my favorite part.
But it's very cool. But your setup is different from those shows previous. Are you going to be setting up any, any of your memorabilia, any of that stuff, or is this kind of like this is going to be your set?
It's going to be growing as we go. I got more stuff to unpack. I'm going to figure out some little shelves, I think, so I can even like alternate between stuff I have up. I think would be nice. So we'll see. I got a lot of stuff to work with, so it'll be different.
Yeah. Well, as everything, and I have just like a screen in back of me right now because I know you're going to be putting all kinds of effects and stuff in back of me.
Yeah.
And, who knows what'll be appearing in my background.
It's a new era.
But we do want to let everybody know, especially those of you who have followed this show for many, many years. Some of you go back and listen to, were there live listening to the show when we aired them over 30 years ago. But we have always released, recorded, distributed the show independently. And we are now with a company called Soundville, who are going to be helping us with the growth of an audience here because they're going to be utilizing what they call clips and little segments that they'll be pushing out via social media. They have some micro-influencers that they use as well. So the design is to bring it to people who may not have ever been aware of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Of course, we have our base listeners who enjoy each and every episode, and they're happy that we're continuing. But we were, thinking about doing a monthly show and then not a monthly show. But when Soundville came to the table and said, "Listen, we'd like to work with you and distribute your show and market your show and build an audience for your show and monetize the show with advertisers," we went along with them to do this venture with them. So we're very happy to be associated with them. So for each and every week, we will be part of the Soundville podcast network family. And they're doing some amazing things with a lot of different shows, and we're happy to be part of it. So that's our transition from independently produced, distributed, and now we're with a company doing it. So all good. Let's see how it goes.
I'm excited about it.
But today, yeah, me too. But today we're going to go back in time. We're going back to April 9th, 1989 at WNYG, and we have a special guest. Is a gentleman that has been in the broadcasting space for many, many years. He has a very popular Beatles podcast that's out there, and I'll let him explain that. So why don't we bring on Mr. Robert Leonard. Rob Leonard, a Long Island dude, just like me. Rob, how you doing?
Doing okay, John. How you doing? It's been a while.
It's been quite a while.
I'm glad the show is back.
Yes, we're going to go over this stuff all over again back in the day. But you were a part of WNYG back in 1989.
Yes, I was. I actually got hired in August of 1988 and lasted a year, which is actually a pretty long time for that station, until August 89. And, I basically worked some overnight shifts. Occasionally I filled in for someone. But then once I got hired full-time when I worked at AMC Networks, I can only really work Sundays. So it actually led to working with you, so it worked out very well. But at the time I was like, oh, wow, okay, I have to work Sundays. But then, when I got the call about your show, I didn't get a call from, Warren Green was the program director at the time. He never called me at home.
Warren Green.
Yeah, and he said, hey, Rob, this Sunday, there's going to be a big show on WNYG, and it's John Anthony. He's doing a wrestling show. He's friends with Mrs. Hornstein, and make sure you do it right. He gave me all this stuff. I go, hey, no problem. And then because when you sent me the show, because I didn't remember everything about it, but when I listened back to it, there was a couple other stories that came through in the memory department, and right after I got a call from from Warren Green, right afterwards, literally, G-Man calls me. And G-Man was and maybe still is, I haven't seen him in a while, a big wrestling fan. And he said, Rob, Warren wants me to do the engineering. We're going to switch shifts. And I go, well, why'd he just call me? Why would he just call me, tell me I'm doing the shift, and then you would tell me otherwise? So I actually called Warren back. And this is the line I still remember all my life. He goes, no one speaks for Warren Green. And he hung up on me. And he called G-Man and basically yelled at him. And then G-Man called me back, says, why'd you call Warren? I go, because I knew you were lying or not telling you the truth, however you want to look at it. So it was fun to listen to the show back. I know we had some problems with some of the phone calls because there wasn't a delay, but usually there is. So
yeah,
I
we
think
only had one line, too.
Yeah, we had one line, and that was part of it, too. And it was really good working it. I mean, I liked the show. I'll be honest with you, I was shocked there was a talk show about professional wrestling. But you made it sound all interesting. And then, and at that point in 1989, I guess professional wrestling became sports entertainment by then. So,
It was around that time
Fred
frame
Arnett,
that McMahon.
Yeah, so, the stories of like Bruno Sammartino, where he'd wrestle for an hour, those type of things don't happen anymore. And so, it was nice to hear some of the stories, and sometimes you would tell me something off mic, which obviously wasn't meant for air, about what was going on. So I had a great time doing the show. I did it until about August of '89, and then I left the station. But I always loved doing the show. And then, I forgot that the first show was only an hour. And then after that, you even said it on the show. You said starting next week will be 2 hours. So,
yeah.
And I really liked the show. There was a lot of talk shows at WNYG that, people just bought time. But obviously you had been on the radio, and that was really cool because Joel Martin was the only other person who had like what I would call real radio experience. And his show was, different than yours, obviously, because it was more of just a talk show. But yours was about a topic.
He covered, psychic encounters and
but
ghost
it wasn't
stuff,
always
but
that.
He was political in a way. Joe was
Right.
all over the place, but he was certainly a professional personality and broadcaster, and had a legacy on Long Island.
And I wish I knew what happened to him because he one day disappeared, and no one knows what happened to him. But I really liked doing the show. I was happy when it went 2 hours. It was, Bruce Jacobs was there too. And, that's the first time I met Bruce, and I worked later with him at Yellow Book. And I didn't know who he was. And he kept telling me what to do. I go like, well, who are you? Because he wasn't really, I don't think you introduced him as your producer.
Not in the
at that
first
time.
episode or second episode.
Yes.
'Cause he was basically an intern in a way who knew my sister. He was a salesperson at PC Richards appliance store. She met him there. He said he wanted to get into broadcasting. She introduced him to me. I was just starting up Pro Wrestling Spotlight. I was like, hey, if you want to help, I could use your help. What the heck?
Yeah, so it took me like a show or two to get used to Bruce telling me what to do. And, there were times I had to tell him, hey, I know what I'm doing, which, he appreciated that, I think. And, like I said, I worked with him later. So obviously, I became friends with him.
A good guy, shoots straight from the hip, and has always been opinionated. And so Bruce is an interesting cat. Matter of fact, we're doing some stuff together now through Soundville that we'll be announcing shortly with a baseball-themed show. So, it's good to have another relationship. Bruce and I have known each other the same amount of time I've known you, Rob. It's 35 years now. It's crazy.
Yeah, so it was fun working the show. I mean, it's interesting how professional wrestling has changed, and listening to your show the first week, it's like, there's so many different things. There's so many ways to find out about who won the wrestling matches. I think it was the New Haven Coliseum, and then there was another show you reviewed, or WrestleMania, maybe it was, because it was April, and it's so different how things just are out there, just news wise, So it was fun to hear all that stuff, and I really enjoyed the show. I was like, all right, this is going to be finally a good show to engineer at WNYG. When you came on,
we had listeners, which was
we did. We had a lot of people calling in, and we actually had two phone lines. So I think only one could go on
One
the
was
air.
a hotline. That was 661.
Well, no, I think there was a second line too, but it was only one could put on the air. So
661-1440 was the call-in
Yeah.
line, and then 661-1446 was the hotline, the second line.
Oh, okay. But it was a good show. It worked out very well, and you were there for a few years. And I remember one of the things I remember was I remember the Power Twins, who
Yeah.
I think they were twins, right?
Yeah, they're identical.
Yeah, and then Broadway Sonny Blaze, who
But they only share one brain.
Oh well, that explains a lot. Then. And then Broadway Sonny Blaze was there, and he was, working his way through to move up and get into the WWF, I guess it was still then. And I'm saying to myself, this guy's good looking. He's in shape. This guy's going to, take over. And I know it didn't exactly work out the way he might have wanted it, but I was like really impressed. And his girlfriend was down there at the time, and and then I remember he gave me his real name, but I
Al
never
Schaefer.
said that. Yeah. So I was like, I was like, well, you're Broadway Sonny Blaze, and he goes, no, it's Al Schaefer. And I'm like, okay. So, I really enjoyed the show. I liked, what I liked about it. You gave a lot of inside information. At the same time, you were a connection to a lot of people. There was the Pro Wrestling Observer, I think, Dave Meltzer's magazine.
The Wrestling
was
Observer,
maybe,
yeah.
that was like maybe the only place to get any wrestling information at the time.
Yeah, like
And
the
that-
inside stuff.
Yeah, so and you were on the air giving inside stuff, so that was something to remember.
Yeah, and it caused us a lot of havoc, as we'll get into as the shows progress here.
Right.
But
Well, I remember, and I know this is for the second show, but since I probably won't be on the second show, I remember after you promoted the Bruno Sammartino thing, and then I remember I think it was the next week or whatever it was, you came in and you said, well, we can't air it this week, and then you had to redo the interview, and I'll let you explain why, but I remember I was like, wow, Bruno, I was impressed he had Bruno Sammartino, because Bruno, when I was a kid watching wrestling, he only did interviews. They really never showed him on the weekly shows. You'd see him at the Garden, and those were on MSG back then, or whatever it was, or it might have been even USA Network, and you only saw Bruno in those situations. You never saw him except for an interview. He never
he
wrestled
a lot on TV, and at that point of his career, he was kind of done with the business. But to get him on was kind of a coup for sure. He was always a hero of mine. So being able to talk to him, and we'll get into those details, what happened and why I couldn't air it. So we're here to review some clips. And Marsh, I know you have a boatload of topics and questions. So
yeah, there was a lot of good stuff going on in this one. What I really liked about this one is, as Rob was sort of alluding to, is that you really towed the line between being too inside and still being kayfabe in this moment, because it just was your first time back. There's an even part in there where you talk about how Martel has turned heel, and then you clarify, well, he's a bad guy now, he's a villain, a heel. Like, you're still sort of teaching the audience some of the insider terms, which I thought was very cool.
By the way, kayfabe means what to...
Kayfabe.
Kayfabe. What's the official meaning of it? I've heard the word, but I'm not sure what it all means. Is it like it's like talking inside? It's
an old carny term.
Oh, okay.
Where kayfabe is, let's say, if you were if you were a wrestler and you're hanging out with a bunch of wrestlers, and an outsider came in, somebody who wasn't smart to the business, the word that they would yell in the locker room is kayfabe, which means get into character. We have an outsider in our presence. So that's basically what kayfabe. It's kind of like an inside term. I don't know the specific definition, Marsh. You might know the specific definition of what kayfabe is, but I learned that word first in about 1974, 75.
Okay.
And it was like the secret word of, you're either inside or outside.
I'll grab it in a second.
Well,
I
I
actually
have
have
to
the Jim Cornette definition written down over here in one of his books that I have. So his definition, I think, would be the right one. But more or less, what it means is kind of what you see is what you get. It's kind of like the kayfabe of it all is the storyline of it all is the fantasy of it all. It's your ability to suspend disbelief because of that. So Ric Flair and Steamboat don't like each other. You see them at a bar. They have to go now kayfabe and pretend they don't like each other, even though they drove in together. You know what I mean? It's so when we talk about kayfabe, it's about what you see on TV versus what we know to be true. You know what I mean?
That's like when the Iron Sheik was found driving with
Hacksaw.
Yeah, maybe it was Hacksaw. And
was
it was like, aren't they supposed to hate each other?
Yeah.
But here they are riding in the car, going to the next
getting
event or
busted
whatever.
for drugs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
well,
they got more in trouble for breaking kayfabes than they did for having drugs.
For the drugs.
Yeah, because they should not have been together. So yeah, that's
right.
That's the idea. But let's get into a couple of things. I do want to ask you, John, because this is episode 1, because we're doing the rewind. This is you, April 9th, 1989, coming back onto the air for a long time. This is the beginning of this, but it's not the beginning of your wrestling talk. Can you give me a quick little rundown of how you got to here?
To start this show?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, my background in wrestling, for those who may not have heard the show before, I was president of Freddie Blassie's fan club when I was 14 years old. I was a wrestling fan as a kid. And then started the Blassie fan club in 74. 72 rather. Started going to the matches. Wrote letters to Fred. Got a newsletter that I used to do myself. Eventually started writing for the newsstand wrestling magazines as a teenager in the mid 70s. Became a ringside photographer at the Garden and all the other Northeast venues. So I became like a photographer writer for all the magazines. Was at college. Left college. Got out of the wrestling business.
Now, while you were,
the
when you were in college is when you did your first radio show that was wrestling based, correct?
I did.
Yes.
That was the Pro Wrestling Spotlight's origin in 1975, and we have some of those college shows that we'll be reviewing on this rewind. Not today, but we will be spending time on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had a college radio show for a few years, actually, each and every Saturday on WCSB and then WKLB, which is our college station. And we had guests on there as well. It was all kayfabe at that point. It was all storylines, and nothing was fake about it or predetermined. And then, I wrestled. I did a couple of matches. I kind of bullshitted my way into the ring, and I had 2 famous or infamous TV matches. January 10th, 1978, they put me in against Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, in a handicap match with a tag team partner named Silvana Sousa. And then that same night, me and the Continental Nobleman, Joe Turco, from Catania, Sicily, teamed up against Peter Maivia, High Chief Peter Maivia, The Rock's grandfather, and Indian Chief Jay Strongbow in a tag team match. And I was horrific in the ring. I didn't know what I was doing. I got roughed up a little bit by the American Dream, and my 2-match wrestling career had come and gone. And I used the name John Anthony in the ring from Boston, Massachusetts. And for some strange reason, when I got back into wrestling to start this show in 1989, I used the name John Anthony for the first year of Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Which now I look back on and say, what an idiot. And, why did you even do that? There's a lot of things.
What I love about it is you clearly were using the name to give yourself credibility as former pro wrestler John Anthony. And I love that because you had 2 matches. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Former pro wrestler John Anthony.
Well, John, I have a question for you. Did with the WWE having the network and also the fact that you can just download anything, have you found those 2 matches?
Oh, yeah, they're available. I have them up on my Patreon account.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's great.
And they're also up on YouTube, on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight channel on YouTube. Those matches are there with Vince McMahon doing the play-by-play.
Wow.
And our new intro.
An obvious obvious lack of coordination with newcomer John Anthony.
So good. Yeah, and then our new intro, for those who are watching on the YouTube version, I put little clips of it in there so you can get a little taste of it, a little teaser of former pro wrestler John Anthony.
That is true.
So very cool. And so then you went out of the wrestling business when you left college. You were doing stuff with sports. And then what brought you back to New York to start the radio show?
Well, I worked out of college. I had worked in the music business in New York for 1 year. Then I went to the baseball winter meetings, got hired by the Mets, which was the job I kind of wanted all my life. Got put in the minor leagues. And then one night I went to a nightclub and I met a singer named Patty Loveless, who was a rock singer in a little cover band. And I just thought she was a star, and I quit the job at the Mets to manage her and never knew, I was on the road for 3 years trying to build up a career for Patty Loveless, who is now a Hall of Fame, Country Music Hall of Fame member. And I was in the music business for most of the 80s. I moved back to New York in 85 and started an artist management company here. But I also had the pro wrestling bug in me because of WrestleMania 1 and Cyndi Lauper and Rock and Roll Connection and all of that. So I actually convinced Muriel Hornstein to give me a pro wrestling show on NYG in 1985 with George Napolitano, who's a Hall of Fame photographer, dear friend. We were on for 1 week. And one of our guests was Captain Lou Albano. And we had the record, the WWF record that came out with Captain Lou's History of Music. We were playing that. And the owner of WNYG, one of the owners, Mr. Saul Hornstein, a very elderly attorney, was actually in the station that day and heard Captain Lou's History of Music on WNYG and all of the craziness that was going on that wrestling show. And he simply said, "What is this show doing on my station?" And that was the end of it. It was one episode in 85.
Hell of a run.
So I continued on in the music business, and then in beginning of 89, the music business went under. It just couldn't sustain itself, and I was like, well, what the heck am I going to do now? And I said, well, maybe wrestling again. And that's what started this. And I went to Muriel Hornstein, and she called everybody Cookie, whether she liked it or not. So I was like, Mrs. H, I want to do this wrestling show. All right, you're going to be selling for me too, though, right? You're going to sell for me too? So I was selling advertising, and she gave me the wrestling show. It was a revenue share. So she put me on the air, and that was that. And it was supposed to be a pure revenue split, revenue share. And then when she wasn't happy with the amount of money that was coming in initially, then I had to buy the time and broker it and pay for it. So and that's the origin. That was the transition.
I think it's important because for anyone who is a Patreon and gets to hear the full episode, this clearly isn't your first time on the radio. You clearly have a method of what's going on. You've got the Pro Wrestling Spotlight name, and I just wanted to give a little history to it because when I heard it, I was like, are you sure this is the debut episode? This sounds like you've been doing this for a bit. It doesn't sound like someone's first time. And the fact of the matter is, it just wasn't your first time on the radio.
No, it wasn't.
But with that in mind, let's listen to the debut intro. This is the beginning of 89 Pro Wrestling Spotlight.
How you doing, wrestling fans? My name is John Anthony. I'm a former pro wrestler, and this is our debut program, the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, where each and every week we're going to feature reports from the wrestling capitals around the world, the wrestling federations around the world, including the World Wrestling Federation, the NWA, the AWA. We're also going to be taking your calls at 661-1440. We have an exciting show lined up today. Last night I went to New Haven, Connecticut for the NWA show. We have comments on some of the matches that took place, and also we have interviews with some of the NWA stars. We have a report on WrestleMania 5, which took place last week, and interviews with former New York Jet Brian Donahue, now a professional wrestler, and much, much more. So we're going to take your calls and comments at 661-1440 and get on with the beginning of the show right after this commercial timeout. And right now I want to remind you once again, 661-1440 is the telephone number. We'll be back in a little bit with all kinds of... Wait a second here. We're just trying to get a commercial queued up in the machine, and I think it's ready to go. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rick Steamboat, the NWA Heavyweight Champion. You're listening to the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, WNYG 1440.
Well, I tell you what, before we even get into it, and this is so apropos because of I didn't know what I was doing there, and this is our first time in this studio, I need to put a plug in the computer so I don't run out of juice here.
Is it already dying?
So, it's dying, yes.
Okay.
It's dying. All right, so I got to find an adapter really fast, so we shall continue in a minute.
We'll pause.
If I remember right, I think I was shocked that he went to the break right away. And that's why there was a delay, because I don't think we would have had we had the spots ready, but I don't think we had that part, because I don't remember talking much about the process of the show. There was no clock or anything. I know that.
So you weren't aware when he was going to go to ad breaks anyways?
I don't think so, because usually you don't go the first minute. Usually you talk for usually it's like 15 minutes and then you go to a break. And I thought something might have been wrong or something. So I think that's why there was a slight delay, because there was only 2 cart machines there. So
yeah,
WNYG was not known for its ease of being on the air. They'd 2 they had 1 reel to reel. When I used to run the Joel Martin show, he had 2 half-hour reels, and you had to cue one up in another room and then play a promo in between, and then lift the tapes up and put the other ones on, and not rewind the first tape until then you moved it to another reel. I mean, there was nothing easy about working there, mechanically at least.
Yeah. I remember thinking that too. That was one of my first thoughts, was like, why did he go to break within a minute and a half? Like, he's talking and immediately goes, and we're going to break.
Yeah, I thought something was wrong, and it was our first show, so it worked out. Afterwards it worked out great.
Yeah. But also Ricky Steamboat, first promo, which is also part of why I was like, hey, clearly you've done this. You are on the air for less than a minute. And you have Ricky Steamboat saying you're listening to Pro Wrestling Spotlight, which is also why I wanted that backstory of how did you have that name already and how did you get this. And as we'll see as we keep going, you did a few interviews when you were at that New Haven show, and Ricky Steamboat was one of them. So,
yeah.
But he did say Rick Steamboat. He didn't say Ricky. So
true.
I was impressed with that. I was like, because you know him as Ricky Steamboat, but he said Rick.
Yeah.
So.
Oh man. I don't know. I didn't hear it this time, but I know there's one where I think it's woman who calls him Johnny Anthony.
Yes.
So.
Nancy.
Yeah, you're listening to Johnny Anthony.
Johnny Anthony.
So,
I miss her.
Yeah. But yeah, so you're back on, well, right before this too, because I always love the original recordings because they are unedited. You have the ad breaks. This started with an ad break from Harry Anderson. Like, that's how the tape started, was the ad before you went live. So,
Harry Anderson.
Yeah.
It was probably a PSA.
Yes, it was.
So we had a lot of PSAs at the station. So we probably played one just to start the show. Because a lot of times if there was no spots on the log, usually it's because it was a timeshare thing. And so they didn't put spots on there unless they were like part of the whole agreement. So we probably had to play something to have a break in between.
Yeah.
So
how did you guys get those PSAs? Because we get one later on from Ronald Reagan down the line. So,
but back then they, whatever Save the Children or whatever, they would send out notices and say, hey, can you read a PSA for us? And then they would send out like a record or a tape, and there would be like 15 of them on there. So. Okay. I'm sure that's where NYG got theirs. I know when I worked at WHPC in the beginning, we had tons of those. We had like Save the Children records, and we had other things too. I remember we talked years ago on WHPC. We talked to Gary U.S. Bonds. We had him in the studio, and I said to my friend who was interviewing him, Steve Dasser, I go, ask him about the PSA he made. So we played it for him, and he just looked at us and goes, I don't ever remember doing that. So, a lot of times they'll just say, please just read the script, and a lot of times they don't know. And, Harry Anderson in 1989 was, Night Court. So, you'd want a name like his.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sorry I'm getting a little bit into the weeds of the production stuff. I mean, having Rob on there, this is a lot of the questions. These are the questions that you usually don't have any recollection of, John. So I was kind of excited to hear some of this stuff.
Yeah, and we needed PSAs, and that was a big part of it. And my sister was actually doing traffic at that time. She was scheduling the commercials and the PSAs. So my sister worked at WNYG too at the time.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the intro of former pro wrestler John Anthony back on the air. Let's see. You end up getting Jimmy Hart. You'd interviewed him before, though.
No, I had not interviewed. This was pre-tape. It wasn't because when I started the show and I was getting ready to go on the air, I reached out to the WWE and tried to get through their PR department access, see if we could do ticket giveaways, cooperation, things like that. And lo and behold, the guy that was the head of PR, Steve Planamenta, knew who I was, and I knew who he was. Because I knew him as a little boy. One of my best friends at college, the Planamenta family were their neighbors, and little Stevie, as I called him back then, was a big wrestling fan, and I signed autographs to some of the magazines that I wrote. And when he said Steve Planamenta, I said, "Is this little Stevie?" And he goes, "That's Steve Planamenta, John," and it's nice to hear you, and da-da-da. So I told him what I was doing, and he said, yeah, we would love to do something, but, you're not going to be like that guy on WFAN, Rich Mancuso, who was kind of talking a little bit, inaccurate stuff, behind-the-scenes stuff a little bit. So he wanted, like, full if they were going to cooperate with me, I had to cooperate with them and not do anything that would piss them off. So they gave me Jimmy Hart in the first episode. And then the Bruno thing happened the following week, and that was the end of the cooperation.
What a run.
It's a 1 week run.
Yeah. But it was Jimmy Hart, and it was awesome, and it was a little dated, so I thought you actually did a thing that was pretty smart here, because you knew you recorded it before Mania, so you break down the card with Jimmy. But then you also realize you're on the air after it went. So you said, before we get into the results, let's listen to Jimmy Hart's predictions and then see what he was right about. And I was like, that's a pretty smart way to to play an interview that you know already is obsolete. It doesn't matter anymore, right? But it's Jimmy Hart, and he's so fun.
Yeah, you have to have it. It's a name.
Not only is it a name, he's amazing. He's charming. He's funny. It's Jimmy Hart.
Yeah.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah, that's right, man.
So... I have 2 clips from Jimmy Hart, so let's play the first one and then go over some of the stuff that his predictions were.
So I'm ready for action 24 hours a day, Daddy.
Well, all right, Jimmy, now we have the second big match you're involved in is the Rozier brothers.
Uh-huh.
And they're now located in Memphis, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. We built them a house right across from Honky Land, USA. That's where me and Honky live, right across from Graceland. And matter of fact, we took them on a little plane ride the other day. We purchased the Lisa Marie airplane, which is Elvis's old airplane. We call it the Honky Marie now. But the Show Brothers like it there. We feed them grits every morning, and they love it.
You feed me old grits.
That's it.
Well, they're facing a team that maybe doesn't eat grits, but I've seen them eat hay on the primetime wrestling.
That's right.
The Bushwhackers. Now tell me about these guys. These guys seem very unorthodox. They're pretty wild going into the ring. You have your hands full with these guys, I guess.
You're right. These guys are wild. They're crazy. They're unpredictable. I call them the Abbott and Costello of the WWF, these Bushwhackers. But
good choice.
Partners coming here and taking our American money out, so we're going to send these 2 clowns back to New Zealand.
How fast do you think you can wrap it up with the Rougeaus against the Bushwhackers?
I hope within a minute and a half.
Okay, and now also, the main event. This match has been talked about for several weeks now. It's been building up for months. Hulkamania against the Macho Man. expert opinion, who's going to win?
I've got to put my money on Hulkamania because, after all, when the Intercontinental Champion, when I managed him as far as the Honky Tonk Man, Randy Savage had 4 or 5 shots. He could never get the Intercontinental Championship back away from him. So my money's got to go on Hulk Hogan. Elizabeth, who I call the Robin Givens of the World Wrestling Federation, she's got these guys so shook up they don't know if they're coming or going. She's going to be in a neutral corner. And I'm going to tell you, next time I see Elizabeth, I'm going to tell her to quit calling me and the Honky Tonk Man Collect, too.
Classic.
He's so good.
He is. He still is.
Oh, he's amazing.
He's in his 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I've ever run into him, he's just the same. That's why I love finding old stuff with Jimmy, because there's no difference. He's amazing.
And he had longevity like very few have. So it was great to have Jimmy on that first episode.
Yeah, fantastic.
You know what I loved about Jimmy Hart? It's someone who likes a lot of music. He was on a big hit.
The
He was in the Gentries.
Yeah.
Keep on rocking or keep on dancing.
Keep on dancing. Yeah,
So-
big hit.
Yeah. So who knew?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's how he was able to get into wrestling in general, was all the music stuff and how successful he was in music. He became friends with Lawler and, kind of became what it is. And I think it's one of the reasons why Jimmy did so well, too, because I don't think he ever needed the wrestling business. He just loved it so much. And I think that's why he's always been so grateful and positive. And I think it's why he worked so hard to be good at it, because he didn't. Some of these guys, they come and go because they just want the business of it all. This guy had a passion when I don't think it was as common as it is now to just be that passionate about the industry to get in,
Yeah.
But I got a kick out of that. I got to tell Elizabeth to stop calling me and Honky Collect. He's so good.
And the Robin Givens of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And Robin was a big name at the time, yeah.
Tell people who aren't aware. Just a little rundown. Of
Robin Givens was an actress. I believe she was on the Bill Cosby show as one of the...
No, she was on Head of the Class.
Head of the Class, okay.
Yeah.
And then she married Tyson.
Right. And the famous interview was with her and Barbara Walters and Tyson, where she's doing all the talking and Mike looked like he was on medication.
Yes, he did.
And after that, it all exploded for them because they were like, "What's going on here?" And then Robin Givens' mother was also involved, and it was just like this big soap opera for a little while. About the whole thing with Tyson, and then what's happened to him along the way. So
and everyone said that relationship and that marriage really led to his fall from grace when he was unbeatable.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd put that as part of the reason, definitely.
Women.
Well, I love hearing stories about Miss Elizabeth because I recently saw some clips about her online, and you forget first of all how really good looking she was, and I actually forgot she at the end sort of became more. Less gracious, I guess, would be the best way to describe it, considering what she always come in an evening gown, and and then at the end she became a little bit different, but
a little saucier.
Yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe it. I loved Miss Elizabeth, and she just was a great character with Macho Man. So I never got the when she started to be involved with Hulk, and it was like, okay, really. So
yeah. And then you also mentioned the Bushwhackers, and I thought this was a nice another little nod to you keeping kayfabe, because you refer to them as the Bushwhackers, and you only talk about that way. But we all know that at this point you already knew who they were, and this thing. And then I don't have. Me too. They're so good, so funny.
Especially when they eat the sardines and then go out in the audience and lick the kids' faces with their tongue. Sardines.
You brought it. In your results of WrestleMania rundown, I only have one clip from that, and I didn't keep it, but you talk about the Bushwhackers, and you go, they have this thing that I love that they do. They lick these kids' faces.
Hey, you could get away with a lot more back then.
Yep.
You could have your mouth filled with sardines, and nothing was... everything was a go back in the day.
Yeah. So this is the other clip we have of Jimmy Hart, and he's talking about Roddy Piper, and it's the end of his interview. Because I liked it in conjunction with your WrestleMania results. I liked your take on Piper's pit, and right after. So
Roddy Piper's returning to the World Wrestling Federation this coming Saturday to do Piper's Pit with Brother Love and also Morton Downey Jr. Any comments on that?
Well, Piper, he couldn't make it in the old movie business, you know what I'm trying to say? So he had to come crawling back to the World Wrestling Federation for a handout. So they're going to give him a break by putting him in WrestleMania 5 and letting him interview Morton Downey Jr. and Brother Love. But it's going to be interesting.
And one other final comment. There's another big match, Jake the Snake Roberts pairing up against Andre the Giant with Big John Studd as the referee for that. Any interference, you think, on Big John Studd's part?
That's what I'm going with, because I just don't see that the Snake's going to play that big a part. I know Andre's scared of it, because I know I'm scared of it myself, but I think the real problem is going to be with Big John Studd. I think the feud that him and Andre used to have a couple of years back is still going to linger over, and I think that's going to be the deciding decision right there.
Well, there might be another explosion then besides the Mega Powers, Andre versus Jake the Snake. We've been on the phone here with Jimmy, Mouth of the South Hart, a very busy man at WrestleMania this coming Saturday. Jimmy, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck to you and your teams that day.
John, thank you a million, baby. We appreciate it. When you're on top, let it rock, and just remember, don't ever trust a midget, okay, pal?
You got it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was Jimmy, Mouth of the South Hart, and before we get to the results of the big WrestleMania show from...
Yep. Another word that you can't use today.
hey, this is '89. You got to put a disclaimer out. There might be a few.
No
references.
disclaimer.
Yeah.
I just couldn't stop laughing when I heard that, because I feel like that there's so many little jabs that you would hear and old insults. That's one I've never heard ever.
Me neither.
And he said it so freewheeling, like it was the kind of thing he says all the time. Like, so funny.
That's classic shit.
Good advice.
That's good shit,
advice.
pal.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't one of the
You're wrong.
higher ups? Yeah. Wasn't one of the higher ups of this radio station a little person?
No, that was the college station.
The college station.
That was
okay.
Lester Singleton, and he used to call up my show. He was the sports director, and we'll get into that in future episodes. But here's a guy who was the sports director who hated the fact that the college program director, music director, gave me a talk show on pro wrestling because he thought it was like so absurd. And he used to call my show back then and argue with me about wrestling until one day, December 13th, 1975, after he berated me and hung up, and under my breath, I muttered a word that started with a C and ended with an R. Blank sucker is what I called him, under my breath. But the mic picked it up. And my engineer was like, oh, and then I got so disoriented, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And then that night I saw him at a dorm Christmas party, and he was lit. He was drunk off his ass, and he was wearing an old Santa Claus cap, and he started chasing me. He started chasing me like he was going to beat me up. You called me a S-sucker on the air. You called me. And it's like he's chasing me around. And people are just rolling and laughing. And then we both got suspended for I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. We couldn't go on the air because we were unprofessional.
Well, that would be hard to argue in that particular instance.
I was provoked.
All right, cool. I was just clarifying because I was like, that might have gotten you kicked off the
There
air again.
was no little person at NYG that was in management, unless you count Saul Hornstein, the owner, because I think he was about 4'8", maybe.
Was he? I never met him.
You never met Saul Hornstein?
No, when I met Warren, I got hired without going through an interview.
You had to meet Mrs. H.
I met her eventually, and you're right. She called everyone Cookie.
Yeah.
I was there when they fired the Italian Lilla.
Oh, Lila Savona.
Leela,
The voice
Leela,
of
yeah,
Italy,
and
with the gigantic gargantuan McGuffies.
oh, she made sure you saw him too. But yeah, I remember that's not one of the times she showed up was when Leela was fired.
Yeah, oh my
And they
goodness.
brought in someone else and they actually had like cold cuts out, which was great, which I was shocked. And
John,
then,
I think John Bonsignor, did he do the Italian hours after
I
Leela?
think he took it over, and they thought, oh, we're just going to continue it, but it was all Leela's sponsors.
Yeah, she sold them all. She had a big audience, among
Yep.
other attributes she had, and she was just like, how can I put it? She had such just a charismatic personality, spoke fluent Italian, and a matter of fact, I think what we should do someday here is I filled in for her when she went to Italy on vacation, and because I was Arezzi, I actually did 2 weeks of the original Italian hours.
Oh, wow.
And I have the tapes still.
Oh, good, because the reason they disliked her, I think, is because she brought in all this money, and I think she kept most of it. And I think they thought they would get rid of her and keep the sponsors. And she went to another station and took all the sponsors.
Yes, she did.
You know,
those were her
Yeah,
sponsors.
so-
Yeah, but she and Mrs. H, of course, cookie, and she would, like tell people at the station, Cookie, why don't you throw my husband down the stairs and we'll split the insurance money.
You didn't know she was joking or not.
I don't think she was. And here's a woman. When the IRS came to the station, she climbed out the window of her office and.
Oh, and that was
There's
one
so
of my
many
favorite
stories.
stories in your book. Oh, your book. When I read that in your book, I was like, "Oh my God, that is such a great." I mean, I remembered it, but you told it so well.
And the Christmas bonus we got
Yep.
1 year.
Yep.
The bottles of ketchup. Yeah, the ketchup. Expired ketchup.
Yeah, the book is a great read. Anybody who doesn't have it, check it out. I like the audiobook version. Me and my wife listened to it on a couple of road trips, and there's a lot of stuff I'll listen to in the car that if she starts to fall asleep is fine. This was one where as she started to doze, she'd be like, "Can you turn it off? I'm going to fall asleep." I'm like, "Okay." She did not want to miss it. It's a really good one. So,
Thank you, Marsh.
Yeah, and then also in that story is about how your sister almost cashed in on that offer that she gave about the insurance too.
Oh, the murder of Mr. Hornstein?
Yeah.
Well, that was an accident. My sister was late for an appointment. She was running you'll be familiar with this, Rob. The basement of WNYG. There was 2 levels.
Oh, yeah,
studio level.
Yep.
And then downstairs were some other offices and a dungeon where we kept the phone solicitor to get sales for the salesman. He was locked in there without food or water sometimes. But my sister's running to an appointment, and there was 3 doors. There was a screen door. There was a heavy door. And she was running out, and Mr. Hornstein, she felt someone trying to pull the door, and she pushed it and hit him in the head, and he fell. And he almost bought the farm, and my sister would have been a wealthy woman today.
Yeah, she cashed in.
I don't like what you're doing on my radio station, Sonny. Kill him, Cookie. You talked about it being like WKRP, that old show, had nothing on WNYG.
Well, you know what? People have, and I know other people from NYG, and of course we talk about the stories, but if you think about it, KRP had a heart, at least, because Mr. Carlson. There's no Mr. Carlson at WNYG. So you have 2 owners who were, crazy, and then you had other people working there too that were almost as crazy. So it was a very strange station.
It was.
You had your own Wolfman Jack with Mikey B.
Yes. Mickey B.
Mickey B.
Mickey B. Well, you had Mickey B, but also Harry Hepcat was there too. So Harry had his own. He had his own way of commenting on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had a group of characters that were unreally. There's so many. My first sales manager there, because I first worked at NYG in sales in '82 when I got back from North Carolina, and I was selling, and my sales manager is a guy named Mel Adler, really good sales guy, but very very eccentric in his own ways. And he was having a feud with the general manager, and everyone was called into some sales meeting, and Mel Adler, the sales manager, actually came to the meeting in Speedos, shirtless, with flip-flops, which almost gave Larry Walsh, the GM, a coronary. But there was a lot of stuff that went down in that station, and the memories. There could be a movie or documentary about it. It was just such a bizarre place, but so many talented people and so many interesting personalities, including, I believe, there was a guy that was not a serial killer, but he killed a few people, and he was also a salesman there for a bit. And he threatened the sales manager with death when he fired him. And eventually it was in the front page of the Newsday that this guy had actually killed some people. He got arrested. So we had an interesting
He did what he had to do.
Yeah, it's right, Marsh. He did what he had to do.
Well, let's wrap up WrestleMania here. There's a short little snippet of a couple things you said in your review that just kind of stood out to me that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
Match number 5 at WrestleMania, Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig pinned the Blue Blazer Owen Hart in 5 minutes 38 seconds, and that was an exciting match. One of the most exciting wrestlers in the business today is the Blue Blazer. His real name is Owen Hart, and what I heard last night was at the NWA show in New Haven, and I understand that the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart, is going to be going to the NWA. Now, if the reports that I got last night are accurate, you could be assured that the NWA is going to push the Blue Blazer. He's one of the most exciting flyers in the wrestling world right now. Then they had a brief intermission after the Mr. Perfect Blue Blazer match. They had Run DMC, which didn't go over very well due to the fact that most of the people, not only in the audience but also at home, could not understand what the rappers were saying. That was kind of a waste of time, in my opinion. Then came the big anticipated return of Roddy Piper and the Piper's Pit segment, which took place with Brother Love and also with Morton Downey Jr., the controversial talk show host. And to be honest with you, I expected a lot more from this. I didn't think Morton Downey Jr. should have been in there in the first place. Brother Love and Piper, it could have been a natural. The Morton Downey Jr. Being involved in that particular situation tended to ruin the segment, in my opinion. The end came as far as Piper got rid of Brother Love when he tore off the kilt that Brother Love was wearing to reveal his red underwear. Brother Love stumbled out of the ring and ran back to the dressing room embarrassed. And then Morton Downey Jr. kept blowing smoke in Roddy Piper's face. Piper didn't like it. And at the end, he took a fire extinguisher and doused Morton Downey Jr., and Piper went back to the dressing room. Hopefully, Roddy will be returning to the WWF as a wrestler. He's one of the most exciting wrestlers in the business today.
Couple things.
One of those segments. Go ahead, Marsh.
Yeah. Owen Hart had a pretty decent run in NWA, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. He had a good little run there, but and then he went back, and unfortunately, everybody knows what happened to him.
I mean, the end of it was obviously as horrible as it could ever get. But he always seemed to, no matter where he went, he always seemed to shine and get highlighted. You know what I mean? He was just pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And he was a great guy. And he was just a super guy. He was just a gentleman, and he was a prankster, and the boys loved him, and everybody. He was beloved, and he was a great wrestler.
Did you ever get to meet him or run into him much?
I had. I backstage at NWA, I was able to, and I think he might have cut a promo or two for us. I might have a promo or two from him. But I never actually had him on the show.
Yeah. It was just one of those you're listening to the Pro Wrestling Spotlight bits?
Yeah.
Yeah. With the amount of time that you ever spent back there, did he ever pick on you at all a little bit?
No.
No?
No. I was in the inner circle.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't one of the boys.
Yeah. Well, I know Sid was very... Sid was always good to you.
Sid. No. Sid Vicious, Sid Udy, Sid Justice, Psycho Sid.
Yeah.
No, he didn't like me. He used to make fun of my weight. To my face. Yeah, Sid, can you cut a promo for me? Yeah, sure. You're listening to Pro Wrestling Spotlight with this big fat... whatever. Yeah. Thank you.
You're just
Sid.
holding the mic like.
I'll air that next week.
What was your problem with Run DMC?
I just didn't. I just couldn't understand what they were saying.
I
But I never really have a personal problem with them, of course.
You got to remember, in 1989, hip hop was not as accepted as it is now.
It was mainstream.
You know, it was still ascending. It was still, even though Run DMC had done that thing with Joe Perry and Steven Tyler, it really hadn't. You know, to be a few more years before it went really mainstream. So,
and I think
that might have been part of it.
I think that was even later, the Aerosmith stuff. I think that was later than this. This was 89.
That was 80. I thought it was 86 they did that.
Really? Okay.
Or 87. So.
Maybe.
I wouldn't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember. And then again, my memory's going to be jaded because I was a kid during all that anyways, that like, I remember that when I was in middle school. My
You
age
ain't
when
a
I
kid
found
anymore,
it. You know what I mean?
Marsh.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny, John, because when I listen to the show back, and I'm listening to the interviews, and I'm saying, okay, where did we record this? Or where did we play it out of? Because, like I said before, there wasn't a lot of equipment there. We didn't put it on a reel-to-reel, I don't think.
Cassette.
But I think I was recording your show on the cassette machine.
Oh, I think I know. I think what I would do is I would go into the little production room on the side, that little one.
Right.
And I would transfer from cassette to cart. And then we'd push the cart.
Okay, so it was on the cart. Okay. Because I wasn't sure. I'm like, did we put it on? But those are long breaks. So,
yeah.
You know,
you were right.
We have those carts, first of all.
Yeah.
But that's what I was thinking of when I listened back to the show. I'm like, okay, because we obviously we were listening to recording, and that was done on the cassette.
We only had one cassette.
And there was only
player.
one cassette.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of. We had just a studio filled with great state-of-the-art equipment.
Yeah, and you just point the mic at it, right?
Well, that was the other way to do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other way. Where you can, if you have a small machine, you put it next to the speaker. You can do it that way, but that wasn't that way.
Okay.
Just from listening to it.
You were right. It was 86. For anyone.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I just thought it was funny because I mean, obviously now they've gone down in history as one of these great acts, and in that moment, John's just like, "Run DMC was a waste of time," and I was like, "Jeez." Was how you felt.
Well,
and then the other thing I thought was notable was that you were talking about how leaving Brother Love and Piper together would have been enough. Did you like Bruce as Brother Love?
I never liked the character. I didn't like Brother Love's character, no. I just thought it was a waste, so.
But it would have been the pop that you needed necessarily. Like their dynamic would have been enough without Robert.
Without Morton Downey Jr.?
Yeah.
Well, the segment, the angle was built around him because he was such a big, prominent name in like shock TV. Like he was almost like one of the forerunners of what you would call like the Jerry Springer type stuff, you know. And he was one of the first. He was very controversial, and he was hot at the time. He was highly rated, so they brought him in for this angle. And but you know.
Right.
It is what it is, Marsh.
So,
yeah, one of the things about when they bring in people like that, I don't mean to cut in, but a lot of times the people they bring in don't know the wrestling background, so they never fit in, and it's so obvious that they don't fit in.
Yeah,
and that's always one of the problems when they bring in people like that. You know, and you're right, John. He was one of the hottest things at that time because of his show on Channel 9. And then they syndicated it. So, but you know, all he did was really blow smoke. He didn't really have much to talk about.
That's true.
Yeah.
So,
Robert, you had mentioned earlier we talked about G-Man a little bit because I was noticing there was all these ad reads in here, and I put together. I call it a supercut, but it's really just two of them back to back of G-Man doing his impressions for these ad reads because you had mentioned he was a huge wrestling fan.
He was,
and
he might still be. I haven't seen.
Oh well, yeah. And this also predates the Monday Night Wars, and the reason I bring that up is because Vince McMahon and WWF, they were doing the Nacho Man and the Huckster, and here was G-Man. He's doing the Nacho Man and the Bulkster. So I thought it was kind of funny. But these are these ads because it was like it really stood out to me as this was an odd way to do all these.
what we're going to do right now, we're going to take another phone call at 661-1440 right after this commercial break. So we'll be back with Pro Wrestling Spotlight right after this.
Hi, sports fans. The G-Man here, and I have a very special guest with me in the studio today. It's the one and the only Nacho Man. Hi, Nacho.
Hi, G-Man. You know I love John Arezzi's show. This is great.
Nacho, I have just one thing to ask. What happened at WrestleFest 5? Hulk Toga wiped up the floor with you?
Hold on, G-Man. That was a mistake. I tell you, that was before I knew about the Olympic Health Club.
The Olympic Health Club?
Yeah, the Olympic Health Club at 541 South Broadway in Hicksville. I found out that's where Bulk went. They have modern facilities for men and women, a full line of vitamins, supplements, clothing, and equipment, fitness training, free weights.
So you're telling me he won the belt because he called Olympic Health Club at 433-0922, that's 433-0922, and trained like a true professional?
That's right, G-Man, but I'm going to the Olympic Health Club right now, and watch out, Bulk Toga, next time you're mine.
Well, there you have it, sports fans. To win the belt or go for the gold, the best train at the best, the Olympic Health Club at 541 South Broadway in Hicksville, where the pros pump it up to pin it down.
Back with the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. The time now is about 6:26. What we're going to do, take another call at 661-1440.
This is I'm proud to be on WNYG, and this is Wrestling Spotlight, and I want everybody to start listening.
Listen, brothers and sisters, driving is serious business, and you need your car in top form. So when you meet by accident, look on the bright side. Brightside Auto Body at 12 Brightside Avenue in East Northport. Why, I'll never forget when Haystacks Baboon used my car for a trampoline, brother. I thought it was a goner, but it looks and runs great, thanks to Brightside Auto Body, the complete auto body and repair experts. They handle glass insulation, unibody repairs, frame straightening, paint jobs, pinstriping, and more. And a limited lifetime warranty is included with all work. They accept Visa and MasterCard, and they offer free pickup, delivery, and car rentals. So, brothers, pick up the phone and dial 757-7629. That's 757-7629. Or visit Brightside Auto Body at 12 Brightside Avenue off Larkfield Road, just south of the railroad station, East Northport. Don't be a macho man and do it yourself. Have it done right at Brightside Auto Body and stick with the pros.
The G-Man.
I don't think the second one's the G-Man.
No. He probably produced the spot, I would guess, but that was his voice interviewing the Nacho Man. That's G-Man.
Oh, the first one, yeah, but the second one, I don't think that was the G-Man.
Do you know who that voice was who did the impersonations?
Well,
a staff member there.
Yeah, I don't know. I know G-Man did the spot, and it sounded like he did the Nacho Man voice, but but the second one is not the G-Man.
No.
At least it doesn't sound like him. But it could have been someone else. I didn't know where these spots had come from. Obviously, they came with you when you were selling them. But there was just part of the the log that your sister had made. So
yeah, I sold the spots, scheduled them, and I wanted them all to have a wrestling theme because of their Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and G-Man was he was an interesting character.
Yeah, at least he got to do those things. At least he was part of the show for a while. I mean, like I said in the beginning of the show, he wanted to engineer it.
Well, he did eventually engineer it.
Eventually, he did after I left. He was given that job. So, but and that works out great for both of us. I leave the station because I had how many checks did I have? 12 checks that were uncashed.
Oh, that you would go, we'd have the race to the bank on Fridays,
right?
And who would get to the bank first, and then you'd be waiting in line, and all of a sudden it's like they give you the hand gesture,
and
like,
also
no more checks.
Well, the other thing that was I always loved about NYG was I was there for a year, and they had 4 banks within that time. They would switch every 3 months, and every bank. You had to go there to cash it because if you cash at your own bank, there's a good chance it would bounce.
Definitely bounce.
And they also found 4 banks that had no Saturday hours.
Yes.
So how does back then Saturday hours were just given for banks, and here is WNYG who found 4 of them that had no Saturday hours. So I couldn't go because what happened was in March of '89 I got a full-time job. So I would on Fridays, like you, would go running to their bank and cash my $20 check. But once I got the full-time job, I worked Fridays. I couldn't cash the check on Saturdays or Sundays, so I had all these checks, and that led to me. They wouldn't pay me at first. They said, "Well, just give us the checks. We'll write you another one." I go, "Well, no, you guys got to write the check first. This is the amount, and then we'll switch them." And then I got a lawyer. I worked at WGBB with Howard Blau. He was the people's lawyer at the time. And he said, "Well, let me give me the information." And he sent a letter, which Mrs. Horenstein ignored. And then the second time, he sent him a real threatening letter, and I got a personal check from Mrs. Horenstein's account. And that's how that. And then I left. Warren Green goes, "Rob, you're fired." And I go, "No, I already quit." So that's how I ended up not doing your show anymore.
Well, we actually there was one time when me and some of the other salespeople actually our checks were no good when we went to the bank to cash them. And we went right to Mr. Hornstein's house, and he gave us cash.
See, if you remind them enough, they were glad to pay you.
If you go knock on the door, what are you doing?
Yeah,
your checks were no good. Mrs. H said they were good.
They were, yeah. So. But yeah, those commercials are good. It was great having like wrestling themed commercials in there because it makes it adds to the entertainment of the show because everyone knew who Nacho Man was and who the Bulkster was.
It was totally a different type of show for NYG, and I think they were very surprised because of the amount of people that were listening and the response and the publicity the station was getting too. But.
Well, you're right. It wasn't a show that was around. Wrestling was. WrestleMania was only 4 years old at the time, we're 5 years old. So it was ascending until then Monday Night Raw starts, and then boom, it takes off again. Yeah. So there's a lot of good things about the show because of that.
Yeah.
And you had the inside information, and you had good interviews. And sometimes they did it in character, and sometimes they didn't. And the reason I say that is, I work at WHPC. I do Beatles songs on Friday, and I also engineered the show afterwards, and it was a wrestling show. So, there were two things I remember. I forgot who. I won't say the artist, the wrestler was, but at this point, it was like the late '90s. When all those guys put out books, so they were doing book tours.
Wow!
And so a lot of them ended up on Wrestling Fridays, where they were called, then became Wrestling Wednesdays. And I remember one time they said, "Do you want to be interviewed in character or as you as a real person?" And depending on the person, they would say, "I'll do it in character, or I'll do it as, me." Wow. So that's something I remember. And then the other thing I remember, and I still remember this. When Stephanie McMahon started to take over a little bit with the planning of, matches and stuff, some guy was really angry about it. And he said, "I want them to leave this alone. This is my soap opera." I still remember that line because the way he said it, he wasn't saying it as a joke. He was meaning it as, there's all my children, and then there's the WWE, or the WWF at the time. And it was a good point.
Yeah,
something you remember.
Wrestling has always been kind of a soap opera for men in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Would you concur, Marsh?
Yeah, absolutely. I always think of it as live action comic books, But
good point.
You do. I have a clip of one caller, because this is a caller who recognized you and kind of. It's a little bit of a longer call than you normally take, but he kind of goes all over the board, and I just thought you brought up so many different things that were really cool here.
Before we get to what happened in the main event last week, we're going to take another call at 661-1440. Pro Wrestling Spotlight.
Hi, how you doing, John? My name's Nick from Massapequa.
Hey, Nick, how you doing?
Not bad at all. Thank you, Kate. First question for you. Are you the same person that was running the Freddie Blassie fan club in the 70s? Is that still going?
Oh, boy. Blast from the past. Yes, I ran the Fred Blassie fan club years ago from 1971 through 75.
Through 75, because I remember reading the G.C. London publications, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and I was reading through those, and I noticed that in some of the magazines, fan clubs were a big thing. They even wrote things on how to start your own fan club for a certain wrestler and everything. And and I hope you had a lot of success with that, because Blassie was a pretty big performer, not just as a manager, but also in California, right?
Well, Fred Blassie is one of the most historic professional wrestlers that ever donned the tights. We're going to have Fred on in a few weeks, but anyway, as far as running his fan club, that's what got me into the wrestling business. I was a fan, and I got to meet Fred. Ran his fan club for 4 years. We won Fan Club of the Year in 1974, voted by the WFIA, and that's what really got me started in the wrestling business. And Fred has been a friend of mine now for about, I would say, Jesus, it's going back about 17 years now. But he has promised he's going to be on the show in a few weeks, and he'll be able to take your calls over here.
Yeah, that sounds great. And also, I'm familiar with a very prominent wrestling journalist. I hope you'll have him on in the future, named David Meltzer.
David Meltzer's going to be on the show today.
Oh, it is. Because the thing was, I had heard, through the grapevine that he was going to be on the show today, but I hadn't heard him yet, so I was wondering.
Well, we're going to try to get David on in about 10 minutes or so. I've been trying to call him. His line's been busy. His line is always busy because he's getting reports from all over the world. But David is definitely one of the top journalists in his business, and he has no holds barred in his publication, which is the Wrestling Observer. And we hope to have David on here on a regular basis.
As a matter of fact, I subscribe to that. It is a fine publication.
Yes, it is.
You get a lot of news through that. Okay, a little WWF thing. And as far as now what's the story with Elizabeth? Okay, I know more or less that Sensational Sherry is going to take over the reins of managing the Macho Man, and Elizabeth, I had heard reports from all over. Okay, she was going to retire, or because they're supposed to market a perfume.
Right, I understand that they do have a perfume coming out which is called Elizabeth, and they're going to be marketing that. I'm sure she's going to be going on the road to promote it. Right now, I really feel that she's going to be in the corner of Hogan at the Garden at least. What happens after that, I don't know. I don't know right now.
All right. And as far as this, what was making big news, this is a couple of weeks back, was the deregulation controversy that Vince McMahon had started up. Now, the ironic thing is we know that he had tried to block a competitive show because, the Super Clash.
Yeah, with the Kerry Von Erich controversy.
Right, and the thing was he wanted a wrestling commission. He was using that to his advantage, and now it's ironic that he wants to deregulate it. And there's this whole business about just as another pro sports. There's the steroid controversy,
right?
And this devil may care attitude that Vince has. They feel, and to a lesser extent the NWA, that they feel that they need steroids to be competitive.
Well, my personal feeling as far as that goes is I totally disagree with that. I remember I've been watching wrestling for over 20 years, and there's never been the steroid use there is right now. And a lot of people deny it, but it is there. It's a very big problem right now. And if you take a look at some of these wrestlers, an example, Ultimate Warrior, he looks like he's on steroids.
Oh, he blows. The thing was, he tires out.
He tires out very quickly. He can't work more than 5-10 minutes, from what I understand.
Exactly. And the same thing I was wondering about Andre. I mean, it wouldn't surprise. It would not surprise me to see Andre just go kerplunk one of these.
Well, everybody feels that one day Andre the Giant's going to drop dead in the middle of the ring during a match. Now, I remember Andre when he first started out back in the early 70s, and he, of course, is a big man, but he was a lot more agile back then. I think the guy should take a year off, to tell you the truth, and try to drop 100 pounds before he gets back in there because, personally as a fan, and not only as a fan, but as someone actively involved in the business, I'm concerned when I see this guy in the ring.
Yes, I know, and I had heard things about, Andre having problems not only with his food intake, but alcohol as well.
Well, I have no knowledge about that at all. Well, I appreciate your call. I'm sorry to cut you off. We have a lot of information to cover. One thing I do want to mention, if you want to call in, beginning next week, the show is going to be a 2-hour program. And hopefully maybe after that we may go longer. But the success of the show, before we got on the air, the promotion that the station has done, they've already given me another hour to work, and that's starting next Sunday when we have Bruno Sammartino on the airways with us.
That sounds great. I'll sit in.
Okay, thank you very much for the call.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
There's a lot of stuff there to unpack, for sure.
I definitely like how you have no idea what he's talking about with Andre being a drinker.
No, I never heard of anything about Andre drinking 100 beers at a sitting. No, I was trying to, I wasn't at the place yet to just keep spilling the beans. The steroid stuff, obviously I acknowledge, and that is really interesting to hear. because of how deeply involved my coverage of those scandals started when all of that stuff broke, beginning with 1990 when Billy Graham came on the show to talk about his steroid abuse and what it did to his body, and then Bruno, of course, coming on to talk about steroids, and it just became so serious after a couple of years. But Nick from Massapequa became a regular. He's still out there. He still follows my Facebook page, Matt Memories, and he's still around. He's still around. Original Nick from Massapequa, one of the first callers ever.
I also like where he's all like, I'm familiar with a guy, David Meltzer.
Yes. David Meltzer. And we didn't actually have him on that first show. I think I ran out of time. It was only an hour. He might have come on the second week. We'll find out shortly. But yeah, Meltzer was, that newsletter, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, was that key piece of information every week. That newsletter would be 12 pages, 14 pages, and it would give you the inside scoop of what was going on in the business. And it was kind of like this, you couldn't wait for the mailman to deliver that Observer every week so you could find out what the heck is going on.
Yep. I know there's a part of the tape that kind of like cuts out and comes back, but I don't think it was long enough to actually have a phone call in it. So I think you're right. I don't think that you end up with Meltzer at all. But let's see. You had a couple more
for a couple of seconds. I don't know. You can hear the whole thing on Patreon.
Yeah.
Go find it.
You had a few. Let me see. Let me check these notes real quick because you had a few. Marty called and he was giving away tickets to a show nearby. Do you remember this guy?
Party Marty?
Could be.
No, it wasn't Party Marty.
No,
it wasn't. No, I don't think so. Though Party.
Oh,
Marty
I know
is
who
a
you're
wrestling
talking
guy.
about. Marty Pereira. Marty Pereira was an insurance salesman who did ring announcing for Mark Tendler, independent promoter out there on the island, the guy that got murdered, the Crazy Clown, about a year later. But Marty Pereira was giving away some tickets probably for a Mark Tendler show.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because our next clip actually is Mark Tendler calls in.
There you go.
And you guys put over some stuff. There was just a lot of names in this one that I thought was pretty cool. Mark Tendler was running a wrestling school.
Yes, he was running a wrestling school on the east end of the island. That's where I met Broadway Sonny Blaze and Chris Michaels, who was another indie wrestler, and that's how I met Mick Foley. Was through Sonny Blaze, and Mick Foley trained Sonny Blaze at Mark's school out east. And it wasn't really a school; it was just his garage with some mats. So there wasn't a ring; it was just kind of mats.
Just mats laying around. Which actually, to be honest, Becky Lynch and Finn Balor famously trained together in Ireland, and that was the same way it's been described by both of them. A bunch of mats on the ground.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
So it works. The system works.
The system does work, Marsh.
This is the Mark Tendler clip because he brings up some fun names.
And we give these kids a chance to be seen, have a professional wrestling career, and we start them on their way, then help them get in with other promoters, or they can stay with us and wrestle. Or some of our boys have gone on to NWA, like Shane Douglas. Jimmy Powers has wrestled on our shows. King Kong Bundy had his first professional wrestling shows with us. Another boy that's doing very well is Cactus Jack Foley, which is, in fact, he's on TV right now. I'm watching him wrestle. What name does he use now? If he uses Cactus Jack Manson.
Right.
And he came from our school.
Well, two of the boys that really impressed me from the other night, which we are going to be featuring later on during the program, I've interviewed him earlier, Rowdy Bobby Piper, who I believe is the nephew of Roddy Piper.
That's right.
And former New York Jet, Brian Donahue. Now, both these guys put on some good matches the other night.
They did. And Brian Donahue was a tremendous athlete. He was with the New York Jets and Green Bay Packers, and now he just signed with Toronto, the Canadian Football League.
Right.
And this boy is one of the strongest men in football. They call him the Sled Slayer. He also, in fact, the Argonauts and the Toronto Argonauts. He also was an Olympic shot put champion, and he held world's records in amateur shot putting all over the world. And he is a fantastic athlete. Bench presses over 600 pounds. He's 6'7", and he weighs 300 pounds. And I just think he's another Hulk Hogan as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he's definitely he's a big boy. That's for sure.
Strong.
Tell us also a little bit about some of the shows that you've been putting on. And
we put on big shows. We've been in Ecuador, and helped me run the shows. There is an old-time wrestler by the name of Dominic Finucci.
I'm familiar with Dominic. He used to team up with Bruno Sammartino years ago.
Dominic has a school that we ran together in Pittsburgh. It's another place for our school out there, and I wanted to run up. I wanted to run the one up here, but we went to we went to Italy last year. We put on a show in Rome at the Sports Palace, and our main event was Antonio Inoki and Bad News Brown. And we brought him in like Shane Douglas and Cactus Jack Manson and Danucci, myself, and I had wrestled as a Mark Tendler, and then I wrestled for a while, and as one of the Super Machines, I filled in for a while. Also, Preston Steele was with us, too, another young comer that you didn't see on the show that night, but will be on our show August 28th in Amityville.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I tell you, Mark was an interesting character. I would say about 15 to 20% of what he said in that interview was true. The rest of it was like he didn't run no school with Dominic Danucci. Dominic Danucci ran Pittsburgh for one. I don't know if he went to Rome with Antonio Inoki and Bad News Brown. I don't think that's true. There's a lot there, to unpack. Yeah. But Mark was a worker, total worker, and he was an enhancement guy, job guy for WWF. He used to always open up every Nassau Coliseum show in the opening match, and his wife Kitty Adams would typically be on the show as well. But Mark was a wrestling promoter, a worker, and we're going to have a lot of Mark Tendler stuff in the first several months of this show because of the things that he was involved with. And unfortunately, he was murdered. It was probably a hit. Because he was involved with some unscrupulous people. So, yeah. A very entertaining character, though.
Just one thing. I forgot that Captain Jack was called Captain Jack Manson.
Oh, Cactus.
Cactus Jack.
Cactus Jack.
Yeah, Manson,
so
right. He was. In Texas, he used that moniker, and he tried to get away from that pretty quickly. He didn't like that, but he used it for a while, and he went over big in Texas with using it. And but he was one of those Long Island guys, and he was all over the independent scene back in that year, '89, after he got back from Texas, before we went to NWA.
When he brought up Jimmy Powers, is he talking about the Ultimate Warrior?
I don't think so.
Who was Jimmy Powers?
Well, Jim Powers was a guy in the WWF.
Oh, yeah. He was, the other half of the... Like, I'm looking at a picture, and I cannot remember the name of those teams.
Yeah, he was part of a tag team.
Yeah.
Jim Powers, and who was the other dude?
Young Stallions, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah. Him and Paul Roma, I think.
Right? Paul Roma, exactly right, Marsh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. But yeah, no, there was a few in there. Oh, Rowdy Bobby Piper.
Rowdy Bobby Piper. That's Chris Michaels. That was the kid Chris Michaels. Yeah. And that was because he kind of had a little look like him, and so they made him Roddy Piper's nephew.
That's cool.
Which probably didn't go over with Roddy.
I was going to ask if it was actually like a legitimate thing or not, because it seemed like the kind of thing you can't get away with for long. And then Brian Donahue, he's going to come back. You interview him at the end, and I have that clip because I liked it. Tendler also says he's bringing in Cheetah Kid and describes him as like Mil Mascaras, but with better moves and stuff. He's like, he does this thing where he walks the ropes and then flips off of it, and it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, that's Ted Petty.
Yeah. Cheetah Kid?
Yeah, Cheetah Kid was Ted Petty.
What was...
And he was also, of course, Rocco Rock from Public Enemy, and he used when I took him to Southeast Asia in '93. He used that name, Cheetah Kid, in some of the matches. He used Honest Mario Savoldi as another one of his ring names, which was kind of a dig to Mario and Ted Petty. And, So he was as good as Mil Mascaras, if not better.
Yeah, isn't that cool? I just thought, yeah, he flips on the ropes, kid. Let's see. You had a number of failed calls with hang-ups and feedback and stuff. And then you get into a bunch of kayfabe stuff because you went to the NWA show in New Haven, and Varsity Club beat the Road Warriors in what you referred to more or less as a screw job. You talked about this referee, Teddy Long, screwing him over and stuff.
Peanut head.
Yeah, and so I have the clip of you talking to Kevin Sullivan about it, but I did not include the other clips because you talked to Mike Rotunda, you talked to Paul Ellering, you talked to Animal, you talked to all of them for just a few minutes here and there about the whole thing, and it's it's the same story, right? Everyone's kind of saying the same thing, but I really liked Kevin Sullivan's take on it. So here's his short little interview you had for him.
First one, the World Tag Team Championship changed hands last week. There's a referee that is now working in the NWA by the name of Teddy Long, and he is, I think he's cracking up, to tell you the truth, because some of the decisions he made and has been making recently do not make any sense. He gave the Road Warriors the fastest count in the world last Sunday as they lost the tag team titles to Dr. Death, Steve Williams, and Mike Rotundo of the Varsity Club. Now, what happened last night in New Haven, I got to speak to all the participants in this big title change. And what we did is we spoke, first of all, to the captain of the Varsity Club, Kevin Sullivan, and what he had to say was that it was not luck. It was just a matter of skill that the Varsity Club defeated the Road Warriors, the most feared tag team in professional wrestling. So right now what we're going to do, we're going to get the comments, first of all, from Kevin Sullivan, the captain of the Varsity Club. For the Pro Wrestling Spotlight here with the captain of the Varsity Club, Kevin Sullivan. Kevin, you guys had some luck last week. You got the World Tag Team Championship.
There was no luck to it. There's no luck to it. 1, 2, 3. Maybe a little controversy because the first time anybody's ever seen
a lot of controversy.
A little. You know, everybody has a different opinion. And what it was the people were shocked because the Road Warriors got beat for the first time on a 1, 2, 3. It happens to everybody. Happened to Muhammad Ali. He met his Joe Frazier. It happened to the Road Warriors. They met their Varsity Club.
Yeah, but the Road Warriors now are livid. What's the next step here? Obviously, rematch?
More livid. That's what's the next step. Anytime they want a rematch, the same outcome is going to happen. The Road Warriors don't have a chance against the Varsity Club. It's that simple.
And listen to that. You just keep continuing on with Steiner. When are you going to end it?
I'm going to end it pretty soon because I have a plan for Rick Steiner. And believe me, the plan I have will absolutely shock the wrestling world because I am the evil genius of the wrestling business.
That is pretty funny. But you know what that plan was with Rick Steiner that we're talking about. That was the introduction of woman as Robin Green, who sat in the front row at the TV tapings, and Steiner became smitten with her, and she seduced him, and all of a sudden she became woman and turned on him with Doom later on in '89. So Kevin Sullivan had that evil plan.
He is an evil genius, the evil genius of pro wrestling.
Yeah, somebody I knew for a very, very long time, and I always had a great synergy with Kevin. One of the first wrestlers who would kind of embraced me as a friend when I was just getting started, really, in the mid-'70s, and lifelong friendship to this day with Kevin Sullivan.
It was really cool to see him, and we did an interview with him on the last run and everything, too, and yeah. And then the only other person I've heard really talked about evil genius-wise was Paul Heyman,
yeah? Yeah.
Or Mad Scientist or whatever.
The Mad Scientist.
Yeah.
Paulie Dangerously. Or Paul Heyman. Yeah. Or the Wise Man.
And then Kevin
I remember the name Paulie Dangerous. That's what I remember.
Is this when you first met Kevin? Like, is this the beginning of you guys having a relationship at all?
No, I met him in college.
Him and stuff.
Oh, I met him in college. I met him when I was in college. He was the Boston guy. Yeah, I met him when I started covering wrestling in '75, and he just took a liking to me, and I got together with him in Massachusetts, and we developed our friendship that really dates back from then.
Wow. Awesome.
And he was one of the guys that, he kind of endorsed me to the other boys, too, like, I'm okay, so, and that was important back then because it was such a closed industry.
That's awesome. That's cool. Is he one of the reasons why you had the in NWA in general?
No, George Napolitano got me backstage, but that was in New Haven, and that's when I ran into Paul E. for the first time since knowing him as a kid. That's where I ran into Kevin for the first time. So there were guys that I knew from the '70s that were still around.
That's awesome. That's cool. See, that's what I mean when I'm listening to this. I'm like, this is not someone who's just starting out. This is somebody who's built relationships and knows what they're doing. I got 2 more clips. This one is your interview with Steamboat, and I really liked it. It's super kayfabe. It's right after their 2 out of 3 falls match where Steamboat wins. It's a short interview, so I liked it. And then right at the end of it, you have the debut of your on-field reporter.
I could attribute my win over Ric Flair. He's been a great champion. I believe also with the road that he took and the guys that he wrestled in the past, Lex Luger, Sting, these are hard-fought competitors. And that I think Flair just misjudged my comeback and me having an 8 months sort of like a healing process and resting, but kept right on training. Surprised the whole world in February the 20th in Chicago.
And he's been coming back at you. Now, last week at the Cajun Clash, one of the roughest matches I've ever seen, close to 1 full hour. It was just a hard-fought decision. Both of you won the fall. You finally got the pin at the end. There was some discrepancy at the end of the match. His foot was under the bottom rope, and Flair has been causing a big stink over this. Right. What is happening as far as that?
Well, let me go on the record to say this. I reviewed the film several times, and they had different angles on it, and I've got to say that he's got a legitimate gripe. Without a doubt, his foot was underneath the bottom rope, and it shows it just as clear as day. And if the positions were reversed, I would hope that he'd get up in public and say that I had a legitimate gripe. But I'm not Ric Flair, and he's not Rick Steamboat, and obviously everybody knows that our lifestyle's a little different.
Exactly.
But to iron things out, I believe that with me coming forward to Turner's people and saying, look, he's got a legitimate gripe. He's been a great champion. I'm willing to give him one more big try at it. And I believe the date has been set around May the 7th, and it's going to be in Nashville, Tennessee.
And that'll be a pay-per-view event, if I understand, so fans all across the country can see that.
Right, and I want Flair to understand this, that I don't want to be a closet champion and just single him out as the #1 contender, because there are a lot of good athletes out there, and especially on these big pay-per-view events, that he understands this. Lawyers are drawing up all the stipulations, the papers, and Turner's people understand this, that this is going to be his last chance at it. Now, if I get defeated somewhere down the road by another competitor, boom, he can have his shots then, but this is going to be his last chance.
Because you haven't given him more than enough shots as far as free matches go. Right. There's a lot of other contenders in the NWA that are after your high.
Right, regardless if the so-called cliche of good guys or bad guys, you got people like Lex Luger, who's a United States champion. I understand that, and he is certainly a contender, okay? Sting is certainly a contender. Even though we're on both sides of the fence, but hey, we're all fighting for the same thing, to be a champion, the ultimate, and that's to be the world champion. And I'm not a closet champion, and I don't distinguish the fact between good guys and bad guys, and these guys want a shot at me, my contract's open.
All right, Ricky, thank you very much. Best of luck in the future, and congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to hear more from Ricky Steamboat, also Ric Flair, in future shows. Right now we have a special guest on the line, Don Laible, one of the top wrestling reporters in the country, and he's going to give us a report on some of the indies. Hi, this is John Arezzi, Anthony. Hey, Donnie, how you doing?
Good. How's it going so far?
It's going great, and we're on the air right now. And what I'd like to do is, I understand you do have a report on some of the indies. And first of all, tell us what magazines you do work for.
Well, John, right now I have an independent column regularly in Superstar Reporter for editor George Napolitano, who I think does a fabulous job in getting the not only the word out, but also the pictures out, and allowing me to do that on the independent circuits. Also Wrestling Eye, Wrestling Fury, Celebrity Wrestling, Wrestling World, just about every magazine out there now other than Bill Apter's magazines I'm currently doing work for.
Well, what's happening in the independent scene right now, Don?
Well, ironically, John, the two independents making news this week are on opposite coasts, but use the same name. The International Wrestling Federation, based in Boston, presented a card in Bellingham, Massachusetts last Friday evening. About 2,200 fans squeezed into the city's high school gymnasium, and the majority of them came for one reason. The Rock, Don Morocco, was there, and he was to take on luscious Johnny Valiant. By all accounts, and from what I could see, nobody left unhappy, because in less than 15 minutes, it's about all it took for Morocco to get the victory.
Well, that was a blast from the past. 89.
That was his debut.
Yeah, that was kind of like me mentioning my real name, and it's fascinating to go back and listen, because I hadn't heard this in a long time, right? Yeah. And just to hear it and the origin, the beginning of this run, which really lasted till '95. It was really it's really fascinating to listen back on this stuff after so many years.
Especially after we've gone through the whole thing, to go back and hear all these little Easter eggs throughout this. You know what I mean? Here's Don Laible, independent reporter, right? Tell us your credentials, Don. You know, and you're even trying to joke with them. Hey, Don, I'm John Arezzi. Oh, I mean, Anthony. Like, you know, like you slip because you're goofing with your buddy, but you're also trying to present him as an independent writer. So show us your credentials. Let's put you over, you know? And even after he goes on and he's just, you can hear his voice change too. From when he's like, hey, how's it going? How's the show going? To, okay, now I'm Don Laible reporter.
Oh, yeah, he didn't realize we're on the air.
Yeah, exactly. But his tone, his beats, they all kind of change as he's going. And then like he goes on for a few minutes about all the things happening on the indies. And then at the end, you do say, you know, we want to get him on more regularly. We want to give him a spot, you know. So it's really cool. Yeah, I like that. And Steamboat, just gracious, you know.
Yeah. And that was the precursor to that Nashville show where he lost the title, and then Flair got jumped by Terry Funk, and it led to the hottest summer in the NWA, perhaps in their history.
Yeah. Let's see. The last clip is you have an interview with Brian Donahue, and then I have the because it's like you basically, I think even at the beginning of the clip, you're like, we have less than 5 minutes. I got to play this, and then we got to go out. So your outro was right at the end of it, and I just liked it because it felt so Pro Wrestling Spotlight the way that it ended. But this is,
and Rob, you were right there too. I mean, you know, we were pressed for time,
well,
obviously.
And the funny thing about when I listened back to the show was we played. I didn't realize the Italian show came after you, if I remember right.
Yeah,
and we played the music at the top of the hour, even though they let you go on a few more minutes, because I guess people automatically turned on their station at the top of the hour and they had to hear it. Oh. I don't remember that at all. And the other thing was, well, I'll let it get to the end and then I'll tell the other story.
Yeah. Let's.
That was Don Laible, and he gave us a report on the independents. We're really running out of time. I guess we have about 5 minutes left, right? What we're going to do right now, I interviewed for Mark Tendler has, we mentioned before, we spoke to Mark earlier in the program. He has a former New York Jet working with him at this time. His name is Brian Donahue. And we spoke to Brian earlier today, and we did a short interview with him. And this right now we're going to hear from Brian Donahue and how he got into pro wrestling. This is John Arezzi. We're pleased to be speaking with over the telephone right now with Brian Donahue, a new professional wrestler and a former New York Jet. Brian,
John
first
Arezzi.
question, how did you get involved with pro wrestling, and what football teams were you involved with before you started?
Sure. Hi, John. How are you? It's a pleasure to be speaking to you and to the people there. And here in Long Island, I've had a very, very, very up and down career in football, track and field, and many other sports. I come out of Boston originally, and I went to Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, a prep school, fine school, and then I went down to Texas. I had a couple of years down there in football and track and field. Upon leaving Texas my sophomore year, I went to Iona College in New Rochelle, New York. I signed a free agent contract in 1986 with the New York Jets, and then the year after, another free agent contract with the Green Bay Packers. While with the Jets, I was doing very well, but a funny thing happened, John, which I don't even think, upon talking last week, that you knew about. I had a little bit of trouble with substance abuse.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is a pretty common thing nowadays, and I ran into some trouble in the Jets camp, and it wasn't really a good time for me to be involved with a professional organization in the situation I was in at the time. So I left, and I continued to do some work that I used to do in earlier years with my brother Jack up in Boston, Mass., which is to speak to children on the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse. And I've done that with the Governor's Alliance Against Drugs in New York, and also up in Boston. But up in Boston, I worked with Governor Michael Dukakis.
Right.
And I've been continuing doing that the last, say, year and a half, 2 years. My reason for getting involved, or the way I did get involved with the wrestling down here, is through a friend, Brad Selkind, in a company, Lundy Electronics, where I'm working right now during the day. Brad said, why don't you get into wrestling, Brian? I think it would be good, and it would be a good way for you to touch the kids. And there's a gentleman by the name of Mark Tendler, who's a friend of mine, and I'm sure he'd be happy to help you along and help you get your foot in the door. This was about 8-9 months ago. I contacted Mark Tendler and Hop Hog at International Wrestling Stars, and I started working with him. I received my wrestling license this past week, and had my first show this past week.
Okay, so the show that you did last Friday, was that your debut?
That was my first commission match, yes it was.
And you did win that?
Yes.
And an impressive style. You went over big with the crowd loved you. And when will you be wrestling again?
Well, I'll be in Amityville High School on April 28th. That's this month, and we're looking for a good show there, too.
Well, I'm sure.
Working diligently and getting things going, and the grace of God, things will go the way they should go.
Well, if your future performances are anything like last week, we're sure you could have nothing but success. We thank you very much, Brian.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate the time, and good luck to you.
John, thank you.
Back with the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, that was Brian Donahue. Also sitting here with me, another one of Mark Tendler's wrestlers by the name of Al Schaefer. He's a great, young, up-and-coming wrestler. We're going to have an interview with him next week on the program. We also have, running short of time, we're scheduled to have Rowdy Bobby Piper, which is Roddy Piper's nephew, on with us, and he will be on with us next week as well. Now, we're going to be running over here just a little bit. You're listening to radio station WNYG 1440, and we'll be back after we hear the theme song for the next program coming up, the Italian Hours.
So cute.
I don't remember doing that at all. Why would we play that while you're still on the air? And obviously we had permission to do it, but it made no sense at all.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, that's a mystery 35 years later. It's like, why was that song played? Was it like, did we have to? Did someone call? Was someone in the studio?
I don't remember it at all. I always thought the Italian Hours were on during the day on Sunday, because that's when Leela was on.
Yeah.
And so this must have been after she left, and I guess it was slowly fading away. I don't remember it. And, was John Bonsignor there? Or
maybe.
Or I have no idea. Remember, did Warren Green call me, the program director?
Play that theme song.
Yeah, I can see him doing that. We're gonna let people know we're on the air still, and that's all I remember. I don't
And that's the
remember
way the
it
show
at
ended.
all.
Is that the way the show ended? Is
Well,
that was it?
Yeah, because
actually,
the music keeps going and it just starts the Italian hour.
That's it.
Yeah.
Really? I thought there was a little more, because I thought there was a little more, at least I thought so in the show. But the funny thing was that the second week, since I'm only going to be on this show probably, the second week, I remember we were recording it and it went over 7 o'clock. And I remember you saying, you mentioned something about the tape. And I went searching through the station for another tape to start it, continuing the recording, because I know how important shows are to be recorded. And I found a cassette. And when you guys were doing the talk back about the second show years ago, you said, I don't know where that tape came from because I only had 2 60-minute cassettes.
Yeah.
So it was me.
Yeah.
It was me who went running through it. And back then, for those who don't know, there wasn't a lot of tape around at WNYG. Just so long, they didn't have a lot of machines around. You had to bring your own to record, basically. And I found like a 5-minute cassette somewhere, and that's why the end of the show was on for that.
Wow.
But
it's really interesting. Obviously, I ran over the second show too, not only the first show.
Yeah.
And this show was packed. I mean, when you look at the amount of guests that were on there, from the interview with Jimmy Hart to the NWA guys to Brian Donahue at the end there. I mean, it was pretty jam-packed for an hour of a debut show, and this was the beginning of it all. This was crazy.
Yeah. Well, it works better as a 2-hour show.
Yeah.
Some shows are 1-hour shows, some are 2-hour shows. And if you're going to have and back then there was so many more stories to talk about wrestling, the independents, the NWA.
There's a lot.
All the competition. Yeah, so a 2-hour show made more sense.
And it works better when you actually know what your name is. Like,
well, you did say to Brian John
Arezzi,
Arezzi,
usually with Donnie. I mean, Nick from Massapequa. It's like, yeah. So anyway, that's just there's a cluster, but that's it.
Brian Donahue's still around. He went by the Dublin Destroyer.
Yeah,
we should have got him.
He was a big guy, big dude. Definitely had potential, but I guess he had some demons, and those may have resurfaced or not. But I always wondered why. He was a talented kid. Put it that way. He was a talented kid.
That's cool. And next week you're gonna interview Al Schaefer and Rowdy Bobby Piper. Should be good.
Yeah, can't wait for that.
What a teaser!
We got so much more to come here on the Rewind each and every week.
Yeah.
But Rob, I want to thank you for coming on today. I mean, my goodness, it's great to see you, and I know you do some really cool stuff. You have the Beatles show, and you have the podcast. So tell us, what you're doing and how people can find you.
I'm on Facebook. I do a podcast on the Beatles with my friends Mitch Axelrod and Tony Triguardo called the Fab 4 Free for All. It's Fab, the number 4, free, the number 4, all.com. I do Beatles songs on Fridays on WHPC, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. I do a sports show with my brother Tim. That's how we hooked up again when your book came out.
Yeah.
Called From the Press Box, which is on Mondays, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's also a podcast. So I'm still busy in radio. When I left NYG in '89, I had a full-time job in television at AMC Networks, it's now known as, and I worked there for many years, many years actually. So sometimes as much as radio is a calling, sometimes you have to leave because you need to pay the bills, as you know. So I'm still doing stuff after all these years, and I'm glad we've. When your book came out, I remember I found you on Facebook, and I'm like, "Hey, it's John Arezzi," and then you said your book was coming out. I said, "Well, come on the show." And so I love the book.
Thank you.
Not just because I know, many of the stories or I've heard about the people you talk about. It was way well paced, and about what you've done, and the wrestling stories are some of them I didn't know. I didn't know the Mushnick stuff, and we've interviewed Mushnick on our show several times, so. We know he hated professional wrestling, and he was always taking shots at it, which, at that time it was something to be taking shots at. It was a little bit different. And, and now wrestling has become, a billion-dollar industry. So
it is
things have changed
a
a lot.
totally different ballgame than it was in 1989. But Rob Leonard, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and we'll keep in touch. And thank you again for everything.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on. It's great.
You're welcome.
As we listen to these old tapes, if we find any clips of you actually coming on the air and saying anything, we'll definitely let you know about it.
I know I did some live commercials later on, but I'm not sure if I ever came on and talked wrestling. Because by '89, I don't want to say I was falling away from wrestling, but I knew the stuff in the mid '80s very well, and the late '70s where I first caught on to it. And then when Raw came on, I started watching a little bit now. But it's like when I watch it now, it's like I like when they do like flashback things, and they bring out some of the old guys to come out and take a bow. But I don't know it as well as I used to. But I still know what's going on.
Awesome.
But I don't follow it every week now.
Well, it was good to have you on, man. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Marsh. Thank you, John.
Take care. All righty, Rob Leonard and Marsh. The first one is in the books, as they say.
Yep, we did it. We got through another one, another first one, another debut. This was a cool one. This one felt like it was sprinkled with all sorts of really cool old little things that will definitely come back down the line. So
yeah, it's definitely a precursor to what's to come. So Pro Wrestling Spotlight Rewind. Here in its debut incarnation through the Soundville platform. And Marsh, happy that you're here with me to do this and to continue this journey for as long as it will last. And I guess we'll know soon whether the audience is taken to it and if people liking it. And if not, then we'll fade into the sunset, but I have a good feeling that we'll be reaching new people who may never heard it before, and of course the others who have stuck with us over the years. We're happy to have the show back for you to enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited. I'm excited for the new look and everything. So
awesome. So yeah, we will do that. Happy birthday to you, my friend. Please tell everybody how to get a hold of you and where to find you on social media. You're a very busy dude these days.
Yeah, I'm producing a lot of podcasts now, so you can find me at Ref Marsh on the old X on Instagram. I'm Marsh Ref, and you can just keep a hold of me there. And if you need me for anything, that's where I'm at. Send out the old Marsh signal.
There you go, send the Marsh signal. And you enjoy your 40th birthday celebration today, my friend. I mean, you look like a kid. You don't look like a day past 28. Let's put it that way.
I definitely enjoy not being carded. So
yeah, that's a benefit, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because at this age you get forgetful. You forget your ID, but it doesn't matter.
So that is true. Yeah. All right, gentlemen, you could join our private group at facebook.com, Pro Wrestling Spotlight Podcast and Radio Show. Our public page to share history is facebook.com, John Arezzi's Matt Memories. We have a private group as well. We have a YouTube channel which features clips. There's a lot of content up there. Just go to youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight and subscribe to the channel now. You can follow me on X at John Arezzi, Instagram at John Arezzi as well. And if you would like a signed and numbered copy of the book Matt Memories, just send me an email, john@mattmemories.com. I have another wrestling podcast. Check that one out as well. It's called Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden, covering all the shows I covered from the Mecca of all arenas 50 years ago. So you can check that out wherever you get your podcast as well. We want to thank our producer, creative director, co-host of the new Rewind show, Marsh. And we also want you to check out that Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. We want to thank Joseph Holloway, one of the executive producers from Patreon here at the show, and for all the patrons for your support of this program. And finally, we just want to thank Soundville for giving us the opportunity to hopefully broaden and widen this audience. So thank you for that opportunity as well. Until next week, when we relive more history with you, this is John Arezzi with Pro Wrestling Spotlight.